How we doing, coin traders? What's going on? Thanks for joining me for the show. Going to look at Internet Computer today. ICP on that ticker currently at 495.2 right now. So one of the big things I want to start out talking about is just a huge amount of rejection. And as you can see, big amount of upper wicks on these daily candles. So typically what we have is that when the upper wicks get to about 5 to 6% plus, and as you can see, so the biggest one just closed yesterday, and that was the 8% candle. But even down to some of the smaller ones, 2%, 5%, all the way up to about 6.11%. So typically, if it's two or more candles, we call these tweezer chopsticks bottoms or tops. So for example, even if it is inverted and we do see these as wicks on the downside, pretty much we're going to know that that's a lot of buying pressure, and that typically there's going to be a reversal in that instance. So right here, it is the same type of setup and scenario. And as you can see, the rest of the crypto space has just been pulling back as well. But we do have a lot of downside supports that we can be looking at right now. So one of the big notable ones is going to be coming in at 480. So as you can see, downside support previously, big, nice support as well before dropping below it. Next, below that is going to be a big support level coming in right at a big prior resistance level, pretty much right around 443 or 444. So as we can see, big resistance like we talked about, which also mirrored up with this 50-period exponential moving average. And then looking left a little bit farther, that was a point of previous resistance as well on the bounce after the big FTX crash. So I do think these are going to be our pretty big downside targets to be looking at. The good news is that it's still going to be holding a higher low, and we're still going to be in this very nice uptrend. So low, set the high, pulled back, set a higher low, and then rallied up, and now setting and rejecting from our big point of resistance here. So if we actually look at some of this resistance a little bit further too, we know that big closing resistance is going to be coming in about 515. We're going to have a big zone from about 520 all the way up until about 560, since that's pretty much where we topped out. And then all the way up until about 580 as well, because if we look all the way left, big point of resistance as well before the big FTX crash. So very, very big resistance zone up ahead. And if we actually pull up the VPVR volume profile visible range here, you can see that right now we're on a big point of mass. So we know that probably there's going to be a little bit of sideways action here, but we also know that there has been a lot of upside momentum without a correction. So for example, if we actually look at the 2-day chart, and I do pull up the RSI, then one of the things that's notable, and let's actually turn off the VPVR here too for a second and zoom in on this current 2-day setup. So for example, let's go ahead and look at these chopstick tweezer tops bottoms again. Yes, all the way up 9% and then 7% all the way up to potentially even 5%. So very good reversal indicator. Right now, we're only about a couple hours into this 2-day candle, so not really much to say about it just yet, but we are looking at downside pressure. If we go ahead and look at the RSI relative strength index, this actually extended up all the way into the overbought level on this 2-day when we actually had prices that were sitting at the top of this upper wick here when we were looking at prices being about 550. So regardless, if we actually zoom out and look at this 2-day chart, you can see that the RSI is actually the highest we've ever been, and that's even without closing at an overbought level. So the highest we have seen close right now is at a level of 68.28, so just there. But before that, prior, pretty much 62.5 was the level that we were looking at as being a good indication and guide. So let's go ahead and look at this instance. So if we draw a vertical marker and now actually go ahead and zoom in on the candles for this period, you can see that this was a big point that we were looking at when we were actually topping out at about 9.8, just shy of that $10 level, and a little brief period of consolidation and then kicked back after that. So for example, if we look at the top down to the bottom, pullback of about 41% plus since we were aiming to the downside. But what's also significant, and I actually want to clear this up a little bit, because if we zoom out, you can see that this 2-day has never, ever, ever in the history of Internet Computer had a bullish close substantially on top. So I think just barely right off the launch, we were looking at a close of 79.38. Meanwhile, we had an EMA of 79.008. So just barely closed above that, but immediately rejected and retraced below it. And then as you can see, we were looking extremely bearish, just setting. Let's actually turn off the 12 and the 26 here. So you can see rejection from the EMA, rejection from the 50, rejection from the 50. Even now all the way down, looking at the current setup, we were looking at rejection from the 50, So just now, we've actually seen a substantial bullish break on top of this 50, which we've never seen for Internet Computer. And now we have been holding this level for a couple of days. So likely it's going to assume that this is going to be a very big point of support when we do ultimately have a little bit more retracement over the coming days. I don't think it's necessarily going to be that significant and substantial of a pullback. Obviously, it could end up being, as long as we don't break below that, then we are going to be looking pretty good and bullish. So if we do look right where the 50 is right now on this 2-day and draw a price line, you can see looking left, found nice support at this level. So that's probably going to be a good support as well. And then on this resistance point, didn't quite touch it, but still going to be pretty relevant and significant. So I would assume even if we do get some wicking down below it, there would be a good shot and an instance of the bulls being able to defend that if this is in fact a pretty big and reliable support line. Okay, so let's go actually ahead and turn back on the VPVR, because I don't think we fully talked about it just yet. Because I do just want to really quick point out the big points of mass on top and obviously below now, huge point of support. So I don't necessarily think we're going to get down to about the $4 level. I think market conditions are pretty much going to have to be really bad in order to see cryptos retrace that much, especially after such a strong move over the last couple of weeks. But that pretty much does mean that once we actually pull back, kick off support, and ideally those moving averages, then we would be looking at an upside target pretty much approaching the $6 level. And so looking left, that does put us right at the heart line of all of this previous consolidation and movement sideways before actually dumping down. Okay, so let's turn the VPVR off and now talk about the daily volume on this 2-day anyway. So one of the things we're looking at is we always like to see very nice increasing volume on the way up. And then it looks like we actually have peaked right now, according to this 2-day, for bearish volume. And so even zooming in, we're just seeing a spinning top candle that does show a lot of indecision right now. So we can know that part of this volume is mixed in with both bullish and bearish volumes. But to the fact now that this current and recent candle has actually closed with a lot of selling pressure to the upside indicated by this wick. Let's actually go ahead and zoom in a little bit more on this. So we have a very big upside wick, and yet the body is very small. So for example, if we actually look at the size of the body, it's only about 2% compared to if we actually look at the size of the wick, we're looking at 10%. So just highlights how much selling pressure came in on this overall 2-day. Now, another good and bullish thing is that if we look at the bodies of the previous 2 bearish candles, despite having long upper wicks, if we look at the bodies alone, then they fit within pretty much the first third of this nice big bullish candle that we closed off with. So that does kind of point and hint to a little bit more of that sideways trading action, just to allow a lot of these technicals to cool down and basically allow the bulls to take a little bit of a breather, because we know that retracements and pullbacks just like this, especially when they are small, typically do end up being very necessary for healthy longer term upside growth. Now let's go ahead and look at a Fibonacci retracement to see just where exactly we could end up pulling back to. So prices right now, based off the top that we were looking at when we saw the high of 557.5, we do have the 38.2 retracement at about 488. But if we do look to the downside just below that at the 50%, it's going to be 466. And then the ultimate downside extreme is going to be the 61.8, which pretty much comes in right at this big point that we looked at for support. So that's another reason why I think this is going to be such a nice downside support, that I don't really see prices getting down lower than that. But so even looking down from the low right now on ICP, then we can see the extensions again. The 38.2 is actually at 473, which is a very nice price line as well, especially since that is the support point on this bounce. So we're likely going to look for that as support as well. And then in addition, the 50% retracements 447. So a very nice support point based on this previous resistance as well. So that's why these are going to be such good targets on this way down. So I either see bouncing off the 38.2 or pulling back, retracing a little bit more, and then bouncing off the 50, and then potentially allowing the bulls to see upside once again. But keep in mind, we are still going to have extremely strong resistance at about 560 all the way up until about 580. So that is going to be the struggle bus point for the bulls when we do retrace and actually head back to the upside from this little mini pullback. Flipping over and looking at the weekly, very nice bull break from this big long-term downtrend that we were eyeing for so long. So it's extremely nice to be able to see that, especially after confirming support pretty much right along 350. So after having a nice bullish break, a lot of continuation and follow through, this is exactly what we want to see in this type of pattern and setup. And so especially when we have such a strong zone that we're looking at for support this whole way, we actually have a lot of room to pull back because the size of the bullish candle that just closed is so significant because we have all this room now inside this overall supportive channel that it does make it that much more likely like we will establish a trading range inside of this zone. And especially the significant part about that too is that we have so much room to actually pull back and maintain our higher low. So even if we do end up retracing for the next 2-3 weeks, that's still a ton of room to the downside to be able to confirm that low. Because if we actually look at the candles on this weekly here, then each of these weeks actually did maintain a higher low than the previous week before it. So we're actually seeing week over week for the 5th week now of higher lows coming in. So we are due for that pullback over a couple of weeks, but we're very likely to be able to set that higher low and actually confirm and maintain a lot more of that uptrend, especially since we have knocked out a lot of these previous highs on this weekly. So this is exactly what we always need to see when we talk about being able to reverse the trend and actually confirm a bottom, because we can't do that without starting to do some of these things on the shorter time frames first. So personally, I don't think I see us just having this big, insane, continuous bull rally to the upside. And quite frankly, I do think we have a long way to go before sentiment ultimately shifts into a full-on bull market, but I do think that's a very good sign because you do have that accumulation opportunity. But despite not necessarily thinking we're going to immediately jump into a bull market, this is hopefully a good sign to let us know that this is pretty much going to be one of the local bottoms that we're going to look at for being a lower low. So next thing I actually want to talk about on this weekly is just looking at this overall pattern, because we have a very repetitive pattern here. And what it is big, long bearish candle followed by 3 weeks of a small price movement, essentially. We're going to call this a little bit more of a bear flag. And then we have, once again, big bear candle, followed by 3 candles of pretty much sideways price activity. Nothing happened. Big bear, 3 nothing. So you get the picture here. So we have one more flush. And then ultimately now we had the last flush of a bear, 3 small weeks of upside growth. And then now confirming it with our very nice big upside candle here that just closed a few days ago. So ideally, just from a psychological perspective, it does seem nice and fun to have the $5 level hold, but realistically, I do see a little bit more of a retracement inside this overall supportive zone. So like I said, I think we do have another week or two plus before we actually do find a trend and what's going to end up happening and finding that higher low. So no need to immediately FOMO in and all that stuff. That's just my opinion anyway, obviously not financial advice for everyone. But based on the chart, that is pretty much what I am seeing right now and pretty much what I am expecting for the coming weeks for Internet Computer ICP. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments sections below. Do appreciate all the love and support. If you did enjoy the show, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button and the notification bell if you have not done so just yet, so you can stay updated for all future updates and content. Make sure to drop me a note and a comment down below. Love getting back to everyone as well. Stay safe, take care everyone, and I'll catch you back in the next video.